I hope you're having some good time at reInvent. Today we will be talking about Salesforce Data Cloud and AWS AI/ML, generative AI. I am Rashna Chadha. I am a AI/ML specialist with AWS Strategic Accounts, and with me I have Mani. Mani is a business development lead with AWS Strategic Account. So with that, I'll open up and we will get to the agenda for today. So in today's session, I'll walk you through Salesforce and AWS AI/ML partnership. We will brief you on what's happening with GenAI, Salesforce, and AWS. And thereon, we will talk about AWS AI/ML offerings, what's on there, and with so much happening around in reInvent, you must be curious. Third, we will talk about bring your own model, which is a pattern. We will go deep into it on how we implemented Data Cloud and AWS integration for GenAI purpose. We will follow it with the use cases where we will work on how the BYOM pattern was used to enable some of the use cases. And last, we will get into the next steps where we will talk about how you can take this further for your own use cases.
Thanks, Rashna. Hi, everyone. I think you've all been hearing a lot about the AWS and Salesforce partnership. Adam announced it. So imagine Amazon AI/ML models and Salesforce Data Cloud coming together. It's like the most powerful tech couple in the tech industry. So what we're going to talk about is how everybody is now looking at what is best for their customers. You imagine getting the latest and the greatest on user trends, the market behavior, getting those insights even before customers knowing that they need it. So by show of hand, like how many people want to understand their customers better? Yeah. I myself want more personalized content. And that's where a lot of heavy lifting is done by Salesforce. They've already tailored data into like Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, industries, and different kind of clouds. And when it comes to data, small, big businesses, they're all grappling to get insights on the customers. And this data is connected through clicks, web clicks, the footprints on the website, their marketing trends, their buying trends. And what everybody's trying to do is get this all together into a data lake. And something that Salesforce has Data Cloud. It is real-time customer graph that we have. And with this whole integration that we talked about, AI is a big pillar. What we are looking at is Salesforce announced something called Einstein Studio, which is going to help get all this data together, be able to draw those insights, be able to predict what the customer wants. So what we are actually looking at to be able to predict what customers want, more from silent features like, you would want to know when to go ahead and market something, and even when not to. You wouldn't want to propose a new product when your customer is ready to make a final purchase. So that's important, understanding the customer signals, and more in a silent way. So that's where the entire Salesforce and AWS ecosystem comes together. Now, before we dive deeper into the whole integration, I wanted to spend some time giving you an idea about the AWS AI/ML stack. So AWS has, what we have built here is we have built our solutions across different levels of model providers and different personas. If you are an ML engineer or a data scientist, you might want to work at a framework level. So we support the latest and the greatest framework. You might want to work with PyTorch, TensorFlow. We have the GPU support, the most recent GPU support we have. We are the first ones to announce P5. You must have heard today's earlier Swami announced the preview of Trainium 2. That is our own custom silicon chip. So we have AWS Inferentia, AWS Trainium. We already have the version 2 of Trainium. We just announced, Inferentia, and we just announced Trainium. Now that's more at an infrastructure level. If I move a layer upper, this is which is our very old ML platform, which is Amazon SageMaker. It's a complete platform for building your data, for training your data, for deploying your data, and we support it through a machine learning pipeline. So that's more from preparing data to building notebooks to deploying it. But we also have, specifically in today's world of generative AI, we have our own labeling solution called the ground truth. Now this helps you label your data. Either you're creating your own model or you're fine-tuning your model. So that's where ground truth comes in picture. We have Canvas, which is for low-code, no-code user. Every industry has analysts, like financial analysts or healthcare, and people who don't want to code. Canvas is a low-code, no-code version for it. And then Jumpstart. Now Jumpstart is a foundation model hub. It's been there for a few years now, but with the whole generative AI, we have more than 100 plus foundation models that are available in Jumpstart. And that's our middle layer. And on the top, we have AI services. All of these services are API based. You really don't need to have any machine learning knowledge. You don't need to code. It's a simple call to an API. And that's a set of AI services. We have categorized them in terms of text, speech, common ones being text track, comprehend, and then we have very specific services with as for each industry. What's new? I wouldn't say new, but what's latest is our generative AI services, like how we have Jumpstart, we have Bedrock. It is again a platform that gives you an option and flexibility to choose from a variety of foundation models, but it is completely managed. It's an API-based serverless solutions. So that's where Bedrock shines, and there are a bunch of new announcements that we had between Adam and Swami. We talked about new models, we talked about agents, we talked about model evaluation. There are more sessions. I would highly recommend to dive deeper into that, and not to miss on the Code Whisperer, which is our own code generation solution that we have. So that's at a broader level, a landscape of our own services. Now, how are we going to use these services across Data Cloud is where Rachna is going to dive deep, how we have gone ahead and married these two industry leaders, getting the data using our AI services, and building a solution. Now, just to give you a quick snapshot, I mentioned from a generative AI perspective, as I talked about a bottom layer, we have our own custom chips, which is going to help you with better price and performance. We have a model building and training layer, talked about SageMaker at length. Jumpstart is the one that helps you choose from a variety of model providers. It gives you a little bit more flexibility and control as compared to Bedrock if you want to have more control on how you're fine-tuning your models, how you're managing your infrastructure. That's where Jumpstart comes into picture. And then Bedrock, as I mentioned, it's easiest way for you to be able to create generative AI applications in a serverless way. And then Code Whisperer, as Swami calls it, Code Whisperer, like English is a new language for coding, and Code Whisperer helps you do that. And before Rachna gets into the details, I just wanted to leave you with a side, there's so many providers. Why AWS? What would it mean to be working with AWS for the generative AI? We've asked a lot of our customers, how do they want to be able to leverage these foundation models? I think they are looking for an easier way to build it, and that's where Bedrock and Jumpstart shines in. It gives you the flexibility and the option to choose from a bunch of foundation models. Security is job zero for us, so that is another strong pillar we have. You can further optimize these models using different techniques like RAG, fine-tuning, continued pre-tuning. All that is what we provide through our services. And I talked about our custom silicon, and we try to have these models in the most performant and low-cost environment, helping your developers to do, your teams to do better in the time frame they have. So that's quickly leaving you with why AWS, and I'll hand it over to Rachna.
Yeah, thank you, Mani. All right, so let's see a little bit about how did we enable Salesforce to use some of the great services from AWS, the Gen AI services. and even the machine learning services. So I'm going to just talk about the bring your own model. This is very recent. We went GA with Salesforce Data Cloud, where we integrated AWS GenAI services and machine learning services, SageMaker, with Salesforce Data Cloud. The motivation behind BYOM is primarily about providing the customers with the open platform. So Salesforce wanted to provide open platform to their customers so they can work and build their models in the platform of their choice, which is AWS in this case. And AWS worked together with Salesforce to provide more streamlined components. So these BYOM architecture could be implemented in a more streamlined way. We provided easy ways for doing the data access. So as a customer, if I want to build my models in AWS platform, I can do that, as well as I can get the data from Salesforce Data Cloud to train and fine-tune my models in AWS account. Once I have my models created, I can use these models to enable applications on the Salesforce side. So that's really two-step process, and I'm going to go into a little bit of more details of this architecture to how it all plugs together. So here is the architecture that we implemented for BYOM. On the right-hand side, you will see, what you see is the customer AWS account. Customer has SageMaker. Amazon SageMaker is a machine learning IDE where you can develop the AI/ML solutions end-to-end. You can use the data from Salesforce Data Cloud. Now, how do we enable that? We created a native offering in AWS SageMaker for connecting the data in Data Cloud using the OAuth mechanism. So you could essentially use the same credentials that you use in Salesforce, but you are in the AWS platform preparing your data using SageMaker Data Wrangler. Now, SageMaker Data Wrangler is a AI/ML tool, it's a data preparation tool with all clicks, no code. You can prepare your data with like 300 plus transformations. You can click, get the drop down, select what you want, remove the missing values, outliers and whatnot. But once you have your data ready, you can use AWS platform to train your models and you deploy those models. Even when you're deploying your models as an endpoint, you don't need to code that because we provision your API gateway in the front of your endpoint to expose your endpoint publicly. And now, once that's done, it could be used from the Einstein Studio, which is essentially a model registry solution that Salesforce provides. And once you can connect to the Einstein Studio, you can use those models anywhere in Salesforce. So if you imagine the power of this deployment, you could essentially use it to create any app in Salesforce using the models that you deploy using this architecture. Using SageMaker project, you don't have to even code to create the API gateway. It provisions for you using the CloudFormation scripts behind the scene. So it's essentially a whole no-click solution from preparation to the deployment part where you are integrating with the Salesforce. So now this is, I just talked about the SageMaker where you're developing machine learning models, but you can take this even further with the GenAI models. So you could have AWS generative services, which could be AWS Jumpstart, it could be Amazon Bedrock, all the details that Mani just went over with you. You can connect those generative AI services with the Salesforce Data Cloud using similar mechanisms, and you can also do the fine-tuning of these models using the data from Data Cloud. Now, these are the two-step process. So you access the data and you invoke the GenAI models from Salesforce. Now, how do we put this together so it is actually adding value to the business? So I'm going to show you some of the use cases where it comes together. One of the use cases doing the product recommendation and sending the email. So this is an interesting use case. It's pretty powerful because it brings together the traditional AI/ML with the GenAI integrated all together with Salesforce Data Cloud. So what you see here is, as a prospective buyer, I have my data, and my data is available in Salesforce Data Cloud. Salesforce Data Cloud is storing the real-time insight of customers' behavior, the number of clicks, what is the what are the products the customer is usually browsing. Using all that data from Salesforce Data Cloud, you could essentially build a powerful AI/ML model using SageMaker and create a product recommendation model. And once you have that, you know what product would be recommended for this particular customer. You can use there on Amazon Bedrock service, the GenAI service, to send the promotional emails. Bedrock service is a GenAI service, so it can essentially create the emails content based upon the prompt that you code for. So if you put this all together, this could be a great use case that gets the power of GenAI and the AI/ML. The other use case that I want to call out is, this is internal architecture pattern. You don't have to read every numbers here, but most importantly, what I want to showcase here is the step 1, 2, and 3, you create the model for product recommendation. Once you have that, the next step is the email generation, where you are going to the step 8, and thereon where you're calling the Bedrock model to create the email. So this is where both the sides come together to give you the big picture. Now, another powerful use case that you can think of is case comments. Now, Salesforce is a CRM system, and there are many CRM systems out there. So some of these use cases are pretty common. Hopefully you can resonate with many other use cases that you guys are working on. But in Salesforce, you could create the case. So if I am, as a customer, calling you and a service agent is picking up the phone, normally a service case is open, right? So this is the kind of screen the agent will be looking at, where there are some comments, maybe I called earlier. So there are comments from my previous interactions which are documented in the same service case. Now, when the agent picks up, the agent has to get the context. What is the information sitting in the case? So he's going to read all the comments that have happened in the past. So instead of having to catch up with all the comments in the past, what we provide here is a summary on the right-hand side, which you can see in the black color box over there. Using this summary, the agent can quickly understand some of the context of the call that has happened earlier and answer the call appropriately. So how do we create that summary of comment is what I want to show in the next use case. So what do we do here? We are using the Bedrock model to create the summary of comments. Summary of the comments is a very popular use case actually with the GenAI at the moment. With Bedrock Titan model, what we did was we created the fine-tuned model of Bedrock, meaning you could send the completions and the prompts and the input. So if I have many of the inputs as a comment, I can say, hey, this is a completion output that the model should be giving. And I create that whole synthetic data, and I'm going to send that to Salesforce customers' AWS account. I use that data to fine-tune the Bedrock model. That's the step number 3 over there. As you fine-tune the model, your Bedrock is much more powerful. We use Titan model for this. You could have more relevant summarized comments created. Once you have the summarization fine-tuning done with the Bedrock Titan model, the next step is to expose it through an API gateway. Now, API gateway does many different magical things, right? It could do security, it can do throttling, like any other integration patterns that you will normally develop. API gateway calls could be made from the model registry from Einstein Studio, and from there, it's all the magic that happens on the Salesforce side to create the screens with all click, no code mechanisms in Salesforce side to create the case summary. So that's something that gets together with the BYOM, because you had your models in your customer's account, but you are really powering Salesforce apps to create this case summary. So with that, I will just wrap up with all that we learned so far. I hope it all made sense. They are essentially 2-step process. You need to get the data from Salesforce, and you need to train your models on AWS account, and then expose that to the business applications on the Salesforce side.
And just to add to what Rashna, this is like what we did with Salesforce. We work with multiple different customers. We're dealing with similar problems. A lot of ISVs serve their customers. So it's very similar. We have done this in the past. If you have any questions, any queries, do reach out. We'll be more than happy to share more details on how we can help you solve and get better things for your customers.
So thank you, Mani. So with that, I'm going to leave you with some of the resources. You can look at some of the blogs that we recently published for BYOM. And as a matter of fact, this week we published a new blog where we are showing the integration of Salesforce Data Cloud with SageMaker Canvas. With Canvas, you can do a lot of GenAI solutions with no code. It's a no-code platform. You could also create traditional AI/ML models in Canvas. So that's another blog, and there are some more references for Bedrock and SageMaker. So you can read further and do similar magic, hopefully. Thank you.